Welcome back, grade 585. This is lecture week 6, part 3. So we are finishing up our discussion of using data to drive decision making with the articles from week 5, and then moving into talking about RTI, response to intervention. So we have two objectives this week. The first is continuation of last week, which is to describe the practices for improving the performance of all students. So based on the week 5 readings, thinking about our outlier students and how are we increasing their reading performance. And then second, to apply guiding principles of the response to intervention framework to create an environment and structure where all students achieve. So that's the lead into the week 6 readings. So you had two choice articles last week, one geared toward the elementary level, which really could be applied to the middle and high school level, and then the other one about assessment data and how it's often used poorly in making pretty important decisions for students. So let's take a look first at how one elementary school uses data to help raise students' reading achievement. Pretty quick little article about Westwood Elementary School, a school that had been doing really well, but they had flatlined and actually found themselves on the watch list because their IEP students really needed a boost. So there was a definite data supported discrepancy or achievement gap between students with IEPs and those not. So definitely needed to give them a boost. So to do so, the principal instituted professional learning communities and growth occurred. So, how did they do this? Well, they established a culture of continuous school improvement done by paying attention to three factors. So, before I give you those factors, we've been talking a lot about shifting our mindset from my students to our students and thinking about the collective impact of all the teachers at the school and really establishing that culture. So, first, they employed specialized reading professionals, which is key. We want our most qualified people working with the highest needs students. And the article cited a lot of research about how effective and expert teachers are what matter most in teaching children to read. Second, they established professional learning communities or PLCs that were focused on reading achievement. And then these PLC teams met on a regular basis, exploring data from a range of sources and then determining outcomes for future efforts and improvements based on that data. It said that when they were reviewing their data, they organized their discussions by focusing on specific questions, and we'll talk about those questions in a minute. And then they also, mainly the leadership, the principal, put in place systems to support the student, teacher, and school performance. So, the pertinent questions that they asked in their PLCs were, what are the characteristics of students who achieve reading proficiency and those who do not? So really identifying what skills and strategies will propel our readers forward. The ones who are successful, what can they do? And the ones who aren't, how can we develop those? And then are there any issues? And third, where are we as a school making the least or most progress in closing the achievement gap? And in order to answer that question, you will have to look very critically at your data. So those questions align to the three big ideas that drive a PLC, and this is taken from the work of the Dufours. But their three big ideas behind PLCs are one, to ensure all students learn at high levels. So as you can see, these questions over here reflect that they're thinking about all students, students with IEPs, students with language needs, all students. We want everyone to learn at that high level, which is what this question gets at. The collaborative and the collective effort is another idea that drives the professional learning community, which you see in this question here. What are we as a school doing to make progress or not make progress? So professional learning communities really focus on the fact that this is a school or team effort. And then lastly, a focus on results and using results to improve practice. So data-based measures and having concrete measures that show effectiveness. So a little bit more on PLCs in action. I want to just show you this quick video clip from Solution Tree on what is a
Professional
PLC.
learning communities is a process. It's not a program. It's a process. It's a process of how do you collectively determine the kind of school you want to be, the purpose of why you exist, and how you're going to work together to achieve that vision. Through the process, you create different programs and procedures. So PLCs create the process to create the dialogue that identified these programs.
The focus on process in a professional learning community makes it quite different than other reform initiatives.
I distinctly remember the question, to our principal at the time, how long do we have to try this new program or package out? It's not a program, it's not something that we're trying. It is a way of thinking, a way of doing business at the school. It's a way of focusing our work.
The concept is not like another thing for a school to go do. It's not another program to take on. It's just a way of living. Professional learning community is a way of life. It's a way the adults decide to come to school and just act and interact and be.
For many educators, the professional learning community provides the focus they want and need.
We only have so much human capital. We only have so much time. The professional learning community concept is very focused and it's very efficient. It focuses the organization on learning. And I've been a part of a lot of schools, and oftentimes the focus isn't always on learning. It could be on athletics, it could be on image, it could be on a lot of things. But what impressed me most was a razor sharp focus on the one thing that's most important in schools, which is student learning and student performance.
All right, so let me switch on back to the PowerPoint. So that was actually a video we showed our staff a few years ago when we started to implement professional learning communities, and hopefully you gained a better understanding of what those are. But I really liked his quote there at the end, a razor sharp focus on what's most important in schools, which is student performance and student learning. So when you think about improving effectiveness in instruction with students, you're really thinking about what are students spending their time doing while they're at school. And I know that relates to one of the articles we read previously, the Lipson article, I believe, which talked about opportunity and the amount of time students need to spend immersed in reading and writing activities. Well, same principle applies to teachers, educators for a professional learning community. What and how are teachers spending their time at in the building? So are they meeting as a grade level team? If so, what are they talking about? Are they talking about field trips or homework or logistical things like that? Or are they really focused on improving the quality of instruction? Are they looking at the data? Are they using the data to plan strategically? So we had to do a shift in our thinking to get teachers to really maximize their time in the building. So now you will see them meeting as a PLC, analyzing exit tickets from that day's lesson, and then planning adjustments for following subsequent lessons using the data. So much more of a focus on data. There are many other videos on YouTube by Solution Tree for PLCs, so definitely check those out. But in thinking about PLCs, I want you to know that there's a difference between a team and a group, and a PLC is a team. A team serves a unique purpose, and when they are performing at high levels, they are generative. They create new knowledge, stimulate energy, and promote improvement in ways that individuals acting in isolation could not achieve. That quote kind of reminds me of the TIMSS study done that is detailed in the Teaching Gap. I think it's called the Teaching Gap, but it talks about Japanese lesson study and how educators in Japan are really effective because they do follow a process called lesson study where they collaboratively plan a lesson, they each implement it, they observe each other implementing it, they come back together and they reflect on their implementation using the data. So essentially they do action research on a daily and weekly basis, which helps them to be very effective. So I think the PLCs is a way for us to be doing more action research as a team. All right, the second quote, a group of people working interdependently to achieve a common goal for which members are held mutually accountable. Collaborative teams are the fundamental building blocks of PLCs. So lots of big vocabulary in there, essentially just saying, it's not about one person, it's about the success of the team. We're mutually accountable. We have this common goal. We are very results oriented. So this is actually the process we use at my school for PLC cycles, and we had to do a lot of training with teachers around this. But over here is step one, and it is a cyclical process, but you do need to begin analyzing some student achievement and thinking about what are the student learning needs. Once you have the data, developing some goals for your team. So not only what is the goal, but how will you measure the goal? And then from there, identifying the practices to develop your action plan to focus on this goal. Then doing a study of practices. So this is where your professional learning comes in. You need to formatively monitor the student learning in order to evaluate, and then brings you back to your data. You have your data you're analyzing, and then maybe you need a new goal. Kind of like in the Fisher and Frey study when they implemented Cornell note-taking, they realized, oh, our students actually don't get summarizing at all. So that would be kind of an outcome you get from your first cycle to then start a new cycle on how do we now teach them to summarize. So that's the process our PLC teams follow. All right, so support for teachers from the article that the principal put in place. He arranged for substitutes to cover classes while teachers and staff collaborated. He also provided some funding to compensate teachers for their extra time. Everyone always appreciates that. Teachers and administrators made a commitment to meeting to focus on data and professional development. And I think that's what will have the biggest impact if we are taking this collaborative time and actually using it as such. Teachers use collaboration time to review specific needs, refine lessons, analyze student work, or discuss peer observations. And like I was saying, how are you using your time? Are we talking about field trips and homework, which need to be discussed at some time, but really valuing and having a sacred time to refine lessons, look at student work, and do some peer observation. So this is a slide from a PowerPoint I did when we rolled out professional learning communities about when will we make the time, right? Just like the principal in the article had to put in place a system, these were our systems. So we had weekly whole group staff meetings, and we decided to restructure our staff meeting schedule to just do one staff meeting a month whole group, and the rest would be professional learning community time. Second, we had created a schedule that allowed for them to have planning time, but instead we emphasized that this was now PLC time. So twice a week they had protected PLC time during the school day. It's hard to get things done in a 40-minute window, which is what some of our teachers were facing during this common planning or prep time. So we did provide release days, 1.5 days per trimester, where subs were brought in for the grade level and they had extended planning and PLC time. And then on scheduled PD days, we provided PLC time. So those were some ways we were able to support the work of PLCs at our schools. All right, there are a lot of great resources out there for implementing PLCs. A couple of books that I read leading into the change management I did was this book, Getting Started, Reculturing Schools to Become Professional Learning Communities by the Dufours. This is a pretty foundational book for PLCs. It goes over, getting started, the cultural shifts, how to manage time, perspective, and priorities. They give you some case studies, some lessons learned for implementing. So that's a good foundational book that I read. The book that I really took a lot from was this one, which wasn't written by the Dufours. It's by Perry Graham and William M. Ferreter, who are educators, and it's called Building a Professional Learning Community at Work, A Guide to the First Year. And this is really an in the trenches look at what needs to happen. and they have organized this book in part one is summertime and what needs to happen in the summer. Part two is fall, where you're building your team, and it gives you a lot of great tools, checklists, rubrics, self-reflection tools, a lot of great reproducibles to use as you go through this journey. It's great to read as an administrator, as a school leader. I can't even tell you how many flags I have in this book, probably 50 it looks like, and they're all color coded by, I have green for personal goals, pink for admin team stuff, yellow for staff PD, ideas for staff PD. So just a very valuable book. And then also is this Learning by Doing, a handbook for professional learning communities at work. This one is also really valuable. It's more broad perspective than at the school level, but they definitely give you more of a process for increasing effectiveness. A lot of information there actually on the formative assessment process, which was interesting. So those are some resources for you as you become a change agent. Other ideas for you: you can help your school or leadership team establish professional learning communities, or if you already have professional learning communities or what you call professional learning communities, maybe you can evaluate if they are as effective as they can be, and you can help your school or team increase the effectiveness. I know a lot of schools claim to have professional learning communities, but they aren't actually functioning as such. And then lastly, you could create your own professional learning community. A lot of you do not have role-alike peers at your school, so finding a way within your district or region to create your own professional learning community. There's an article in the October Reading Teacher titled PLCs in Action, Innovative Teaching for Struggling Grade 3-5 Readers. And it talks about within a district, they created a PLC of reading teachers and reading specialists, and they were able to create a goal and identify practices toward that goal to actually increase the work of the struggling readers in grades 3-5, and they did a pretty remarkable job. So that's a great article detailing how they did that. All right, let's switch and talk about the second article. Are assessment data really driving middle school reading instruction? What we can learn from one student's experience. And this is kind of an interesting perspective to take, is doing a case study of a student at your school. And we considered doing this. Haven't had the time to yet, but I really would like to pick a specific student and follow them through their day, not really follow them, but to just think about or kind of observe them through their day about how they're accessing the resources and the instruction that they're receiving, and if they are getting their needs met, because I guarantee you not all students are getting their needs met through what we've got going on. But so here the problem: we have students who might be good word callers, but they're not able to read textbooks with unfamiliar vocabulary. So there were some high stakes assessments given, and that they identified from those tests that many students needed remedial reading classes. But these assessments obviously don't provide teachers with little specific information. So they're in Florida. I believe the assessment they gave was the FCAT, which, like the CST in California, just tells you who's basic, who's below basic, that sort of thing. But they don't give you diagnostic information as to why the student is performing at that level. So it's very hard to make instructional decisions off of that data, which is what the article warns you against. So programs that schools are putting in place don't necessarily match the instructional method to the need of the students, because they don't know what the need of the students are beyond the fact that they performed poorly and are not proficient on the test. So the research was focused on one middle school in Florida. They'd been rated an A from the state, but recently failed to meet AYP. One problem found by Allington was the change in how the NAEP was reported. So previously, students were compared to themselves, so more of a criterion reference. Now, NAEP reports how many students achieved at a performance level, so now they're doing a norm reference test. So with a norm reference test, the bell curve comes into play. So if 50% is your, proficient, if 50% and above is proficient, there will always be someone who is below that 50% cutoff and is not proficient. So that is a hindrance of a norm reference test there. Criterion reference would definitely be better. So, some outcomes they found and suggestions are that reading instruction must be based on meaningful assessment. Teachers need to look at the test items, not so they can teach to the test, but so they can provide strategies for the student to be successful on that test and in their school career. So, taking a look at the demographics of the school, which you should be doing for assignment 3, there's 968 students. 58% are on free and reduced lunch, so that tells you there's some Title I there. 62% of students are minority, but the school has a gifted magnet program, which could explain for the discrepancy between the high achieving students and the low achieving students. So they did not meet AYP, but they're an ACE school. Their FCAT scores are at extreme ends, highs and lows. There's not as much in between, which is likely an outcome of having the gifted and talented program. The high students score as well or better than the highest students in the district, but the low students score lower than the lowest in the district. So according to the state, the school was an A. Its AYP was a target. However, the goal for the district and the nation requires that each student be reading at a 3 or better. So to address this, the school implemented 3 quote-unquote research-based reading programs. They don't tell you what they are. One is a decoding program used with special ed students. Some of these are done by non-licensed staff members for 15 minutes during content area classes, and then teachers were given a 2-day training on how to implement. Could have provided maybe more development around that. So looking at the principal is very worried that the teachers are losing their autonomy with the mandated programs. Yeah, probably. He would like to implement elementary school environment, including learning center, small group instruction, guided reading, so more differentiated practices, and wants to train teachers to use test scores, not fear them. So the teacher has a PhD in conservation, is a certified teacher but didn't go through a formal training program, wants students to experience success, but he feels very inundated with professional development classes on reading, on special education, on the district induction program. And that's one thing we need to think about too, is what are we overwhelming people with PD, or are we streamlining and having that focus that we need to have? This teacher could not articulate his reading program, goals, the curriculum, or assessments, which we saw in some of the readings is critical for being one of those high-performing schools. He did volunteer to have the researcher and observe and help him in his classroom, which sounds like a great idea for that teacher. So looking at the student, Jennifer is in 6th grade in this teacher's science class. She refers to her class as a special class for students who don't do well in school. She doesn't feel it's a good place for her, but she does feel she gets a lot of help that other students do not. She sees herself as a good reader and does read on her own. Many family members read. She feels school is boring. She said she has never looked at the textbook. She said she passed the FCAT last year, but she did not. So interesting to look at the perspective of the principal, the teacher, and the student. So they assessed Jennifer using many different assessments, kind of similar to our Read 516 course. They started with print concepts, I believe. Nope, the reading attitude survey. Then they went on to print concepts, letter recognition, phoneme segmentation, word attack, decoding efficiency, spelling, basic reading inventories. So the in-depth assessments found that she's actually reading with comprehension at the 4th or 5th grade level. So she's only a year behind 6th grade, but yet she scored a 1 on the FCAT. So the district placed her in the phonics program at the beginning stage. And the teacher hasn't been trained in how to read the results of the in-depth assessment, so poor Jennifer has been placed in a program that doesn't match her needs. So this is hope a warning to you all of what can happen when you inappropriately place a student in a program based on shallow data. All right, that is our readings from last week. This week, again, you're reading the position statement on RTI, which gives you those guiding principles of RTI. Looking at the online article provided by the RTI network, and then either picking from Assessment in RTI, which reviews the different types of assessment pertinent to the framework, diagnostics, progress monitoring, that kind of thing, and then what RTI means for content area teachers. That is a great article. I definitely recommend. Hopefully you feel like you've gotten some more tools, strategies for improving the performance of all students. This week we really talked about professional learning communities. Next week we'll talk more about RTI and the RTI framework, as you will be reading about them now. And to launch you, I have kind of a humorous video titled Why We Need Common Core. I choose C.
Hello. Welcome to Energy Conservation Incorporated.
Thank you. I really hope to get a job here.
Well, let's get started with your interview. What do you think are your greatest strengths?
My greatest strengths.
Yes, your greatest strengths.
What are my answer choices?
What do you mean?
My answer choices. You know, A, B, C, or D.
There are not any answer choices.
Oh, I understand. In that case, I choose C.
You choose C?
Yes, I choose C. My 5th grade teacher told me to always choose C when I did not know the answer.
Oh, it sounds like your 5th grade teacher really prepared you for your future. Moving on then. This job will require you to write proposals about energy conservation. Are you a strong writer?
Yes. My teachers always told me that I write very good stories. I also like to write poetry.
Well, we will not need you to write poetry or stories. We will need you to write proposals regarding energy conservation.
Proposals. Is that like writing a persuasive essay?
Sure.
In that case, yes. I am very good at writing proposals. Every year in school, my teachers made me write a proposal regarding school uniform policies. I also wrote some proposals about banning cell phones in school. Would you like to read them?
No, I would not like to read them. If you get a job here, you will need to write proposals about energy conservation. Your proposals will need to include basic mathematical equations as well as scientific research.
Wait.
What is wrong?
I am confused.
That is not very surprising.
You said I would have to include mathematical equations and scientific research in my writing.
Yes, that is what I said.
But that doesn't make sense.
What doesn't make sense?
Math, science, and writing. They are separate subjects. I don't know if I can incorporate math and science into my writing. They are all very different.
Well, if you work here, that is what you will have to do.
This job seems very difficult. I do not think my public education prepared me to work here.
Well, I have to agree with you. I have one more question for you, though. Why did you think you were ever qualified to work here in the first place? Why are you looking around?
You asked me a question, and I do not know the answer. So, I am looking for someone to think, pair, share with.
There is no one for you to think, pair, share with.
I hope you're cracking up at this
In
point.
that case, I choose C.
I think I've heard enough. Thank you for coming in.
All right, in that note, I don't think they got the job, and this is why we need to prepare our students to be critical thinkers and to not just give them test-taking strategies. So have a great week, and I will see you next week when we talk more in depth about RTI.